Well, it's been a whirlwind of a week for the Las Vegas Raiders. Josh McDaniels out as head coach, Dave Ziegler out as GM, Antonio Pierce and Champ Kelly in as interim hires, and Aiden O'Connell now the team's starting quarterback. To break down this franchise reset, we chat with Raiders Nation radio host JT the Brick. All right, JT, so it's 10 o'clock, Halloween night, trade deadline has passed, and the news breaks. Were you shocked? What was your reaction to Josh McDaniels being?
Well, my reaction was something had to change because the Raiders were playing really poorly, and the season still has an opportunity to be turned around. So I was hoping from dealing with the coach and the former GM that they'd get it right and they'd have an opportunity to turn it around and maybe they'd get it going again. But it all kind of started trending downward in Chicago. Once the Raiders lost to the Bears and Tyson Bagent and really didn't have any juice on offense, and then they had the opportunity on Monday Night Football and the offense was about as bad as it could be, they had to make a change.
I think a lot of Raider fans would agree that it's not all that surprising that McDaniels was let go, but the more surprising aspect is that it was a mid-season firing. Why do you think Mark Davis felt like now is the time to make a change instead of December or January?
I think Mark looked at the deal and said he could save the season, he could take a shot at this, and he didn't think the plan was working. This was vetted and it was a good plan when it initially started to find guys who came from a winning culture and a winning organization that won a lot of Super Bowls and try to bring that formula here. It was vetted. A lot of people are on board with it, and then it didn't work. So Mark, who makes decisions daily on a lot of different issues, looked at it and said he'd rather start the process with Antonio Pierce and try to give this team a shot of adrenaline, get them going, and win a couple of games. I mean, if the Raiders end up beating the Giants and the Jets back-to-back, it's 5-5, and the season looks completely different. Raiders haven't even had their bye week yet. So it's been, a storm over the last couple of weeks. And look, I don't think the coaches would have been gone if they beat Chicago and beat Detroit. And that was the case. The team on offense was playing terribly poor, and that's why a change was made.
What's different about this coaching change for the Raiders compared to any other in the NFL might be the whole Patriot Way system, the Bill Belichick tree. So it wasn't just McDaniels, but instead it's the whole regime that's really seeing a complete overhaul. How do you think that aspect where you're really overturning the whole direction of the franchise makes this a bit different?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think if you're going to do something like that, you do it early. And you try to get ahead of the coaching search. And I'm not interested in a coaching search. I want Antonio Pierce to be the head coach of this team. I want him to do great and win as many games as possible. So Mark has to make a decision on a coach, and Antonio Pierce's name is highly thought after. So I've always treated that everywhere with the coach the same way. But it gives you a chance to get ahead of the next draft. It gives you a chance to get ahead of free agency. It gives a chance for Champ Kelly, who's the interim GM, who's a great guy, to kind of put his stamp on the organization going forward. And the most important thing, it gives the organization a shot of adrenaline, that they can do something big. And now it's a new start. This happens in sports often. Usually doesn't happen at night on Halloween, but that's when it happened. And I back Mark Davis for making a bold decision at a time where a big decision needed to be made.
So the Raiders signed Jimmy Garoppolo to a 3-year deal, a lot of money in that contract over the offseason, and here we are 9 weeks into the season, and Aiden O'Connell is the starter, and most likely Jimmy G's not going to be behind center the rest of the season. What do you make of this quarterback change?
Well, I think they wanted to make a change to give Aiden O'Connell an opportunity now because Jimmy's been hurt this year. What a lot of people aren't talking about, and Jimmy's on the team, and Jimmy's a captain, and as Antonio Pierce said earlier today, he's going to play. There's a point in the season where they're going to need him to come off the bench and play. This is football in the NFL. So Jimmy's a real big part of this team. He's a culture guy. He's a leader in the locker room. He makes a lot of money. I thought Jimmy played better this year. The whole key was, if you look at the coach, if you look at the GM and Jimmy Garoppolo, they all came in as a package deal. And because the offense underperformed, the coach and the GM lost their job and the offensive coordinator. If the quarterback played at a much higher level to his ability, I don't think we're having this conversation today.
Yeah. So last time the Raiders had an interim head coach, it was Rich Bisaccia, and the Raiders made the playoffs despite so much turmoil in that season. And a lot of fans and players hated to see Bisaccia go. And of course, Mark Davis hiring McDaniels instead. How do you think that experience might change the mindset of the franchise as they evaluate Antonio Pierce?
That's another fair question. I think that Mark has got a big decision to make depending on how Coach Pierce does, and we're hoping he does great. And then maybe that changes the decision for taking the interim tag off and not looking at possibly a bigger name, a more established name. You know, Rich Bisaccia did an incredible job. I had a front row seat for that, and the team made the postseason. But Mark at the time wanted to go big with an offensive coordinator, head coach that was available, and a young GM that he thought would be a good fit for the organization. It turned out it didn't work, so we'll pivot now. But that's an open-ended question. I think we got to wait to see how this coach does, but we hope he does a hell of a job, especially this Sunday going up against his former team, the New York Giants, where Antonio Pierce was a star and led him to a Super Bowl.
What do you want to see out of this Raiders team going forward? Because there is that new spark, the new adrenaline in the building with a former player at head coach. But what do you want to see in that on-field product that's going to prove to you that maybe this team has turned the corner?
I want to see him play faster. I want to see him play with more fun. I want to see him be more aggressive. And the most important thing I've been telling everyone, I want to see more clutch plays. What I didn't see were clutch plays. We saw touchdowns and runs and all that, but I want to see more plays on 3rd and long or 3rd and 7 or a big play that happens in the 4th quarter that's a clutch play. Someone steps up and makes a monster play and you say, that was clutch. That's a play that we'll remember. There wasn't enough of that. There's been some of those plays on defense. The safety sacked at end of the game against New England. Marcus Peters just had a pick 6 last week in the loss. Let's see more plays that are clutch, that could flip a game. If that happens, then I think this offense can get going. It's all about the offense now. The offense needs to wake up, and the offense needs to play faster, smarter, and they need to have more clutch plays.
I think when you look at the big picture behind the McDaniels era, especially when you're implementing a system like the one from the Patriots, many people might think that he would just need time, right? You sign McDaniels to this 6-year deal, right? And that's kind of understanding that you're going to give him at least 3 or 4 years. But things went downhill so fast, of course, with Derek Carr leaving, and now so far this season only being 3-5. When you look back on the McDaniels era, do you kind of think that it was a mistake making the hire in the first place? If the franchise really wanted to win now and not have it take 3 or 4 seasons?
No, I don't think it was a mistake at all. It was a vetted decision. I thought at the time it was a good decision. I'm not a backtracker. I'm not going to look back, hindsight. It didn't work. It's like this happens every day. It happens in Vegas. It happens with the launch of casinos. It happens with Fortune 500 companies. You make a decision, you make it for the right way. It doesn't work, then you move and you pivot. That's all it is. I mean, we can go back in the time machine and talk about all hires in all of sports. We were talking about the Texas Rangers ahead of time. A lot of people weren't saying Bruce Bochy. Matter of fact, my Yankees weren't saying Bruce Bochy. I wish my Yankees would have said goodbye to Aaron Boone and said, hey, Bruce Bochy, come in, and maybe they win a World Series. It's all about, life is short. You make decisions, you make strong decisions, and if you get them wrong, you admit that they didn't work out and you move fast to correct it. And that's what Mark Davis did. No one wants to win more than Mark Davis. Mark Davis wants to win. He brought the Raiders to Vegas, this unbelievable stadium, the charity work he does. The Aces have won 2 championships, and nothing Mark wants to do more is win with the Raiders. And if he gets it wrong, he's front and center and he admits it. He's been patient. I thought he was pretty patient with these guys. He was very patient with this team. It was last year it didn't work. This year it didn't work out of the gate. Looked like maybe they could get it going. And then Chicago and Detroit made it obvious that a change needed to be made, and we'll get behind it. I mean, Raider Nation today and Raider Nation in the city is looking for a reset, and we get the reset with Antonio Pierce.
Last one for you, JT. So there's been a lot of ups and downs since the Raiders were last in a Super Bowl in 2002, and ever since Mark Davis took over for Al, there have been a lot of head coaches, be it interim or full-time head coaches of this team. And now with the move to Vegas and trying to grow this fan base, when you look at the big picture, how important is it for the Raiders to get it right this time?
It was important for them to get it right when John Gruden came here. Unfortunately, the circumstances behind that. It was important when Josh McDaniels was hired. Now it's even more important. The Super Bowl's here this year. There is a priority for Mark, and Mark wants to get this right. So he's going to sit back and see what Coach Pierce can do. Let's see how these players Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs, Mad Max Crosby react. Let's see if they react and they play a higher brand of football, and that could have a lot to do with the upcoming decision here at the end of the year.
So JT, Raiders 3-5, inheriting a new head coach with Antonio Pierce, a former Giant. How do you think that his former playing experience can translate to on-field production?
I was the first to interview him, and he jumped out of the chair. He's excited. He's going to let all his coaches do a great job. He's going to defer on the offensive side, special teams. He's a linebacker coach, a defensive coach. He'll have the defense ready to play, but it's on the offensive coaches to call the right plays and for them to execute.
And when it comes to the other pieces around Pierce, especially on the offensive side of the ball, because Pierce's background comes on the defensive side of the ball, what gives you confidence that maybe the rest of this season can look better offensively, even with a rookie quarterback?
Well, that's the thing. The offensive line's got to play better. The quarterback, the young quarterback, Aiden O'Connell's got to play better. And most importantly, we got to see something come big time out of Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs was the leading rusher in the NFL. He's got to get going here, blocks or not. He's got to dominate games now and be the workhorse back that everyone expects.
So, JT, some fans could be split, right, on a decision of would they rather see the Raiders still try to win now and make the most of this season, or play for the future and play for that draft pick and play for future assets? What do you make of the situation?
Just win, baby. There's not a Raider fan on God's green earth that wants to lose a game ever. This franchise doesn't look at, let's look down the road or a draft pick. They want to win. We got a job to do, win football games. That's all that matters.